And our book of the month, Creativity by Matthew Fox. Creativity in thought, word, and deed. Yes. So, go ahead. Next slide. Yes. Question for you. Is spirit creative? How do you know? You are right on. Matter of fact, I'm getting ahead of myself, but that's okay. The reason why we know is because we evolved out of, billions and millions of years to be here today. Did that happen based on no creativity? No. So, how do you know spirit is creative? Because you see it, you experience it. Next slide. I guess I need to find a better. So, I mentioned that I went for a run in the park, and of course, my photography is not as beautiful as Natalie Lang's as we see in our bookstore, but I was so excited. How many of you have an iPhone and done live photos? Have you done the live photo? Where you take a picture of something, and when you actually go to look at it again, it takes a few snapshots before it gets the final snapshot. So I was chasing butterflies around as they were chasing each other. And, I can't make the PowerPoint do that, but I'll show you on my iPhone. It's like, got them, and they're swirling around the snapshot. And it's really fun. And, we believe here that, yes, you live heaven on earth based on the nature of your mind, right? Heaven on earth, depending on how you choose to view the world, or you can discover that you're experiencing hell on earth. And that happens too based on, again, our beliefs, how we think, and how we see the world. So it's important for us to be mindful, or you wouldn't recognize all this creativity. You wouldn't recognize all the possibilities. Next slide. This is my brother-in-law and my two nieces. Some stories to go with this. So last week, let me begin with, many of you may know that my sister died in 2004, and I say that because I was a part of this community, and together I shared that journey. My sister was only 39 years old, and at the time, these two were 7 and 9 years old. It just so happens that they're both going to graduate this year. One did it in 3 years, one did it in 4 years. And so last Sunday, where was I? I was in Arizona with my family. And I have a very large family on the Fernandes side, and there were many of us at the graduation. And my brother-in-law and my brother-in-law has remarried, and I'm telling you this for context because it'll make more sense, remarried a woman who didn't really have family. And so when my brother-in-law married, I call her my sister-in-law, my parents asked to adopt her. So we are very tightly connected, and of course she has 3 boys that also have children. So of course, again, we have a very large family here at this graduation, and we all go into the big auditorium, and this gentleman says, "I'm from Chico," and he's the keynote speaker. And I'm like, and I'm looking at my family's looking at me, and Rick Grigsby is telling his story about that his first wife had cancer and died when he had 2 young boys. And that just gives me chills just now. And he's telling this very inspirational story about how he married a woman who was not just the stepmother, but the real mother to his previous boys as well as the other boys that he now has. And he just keeps telling the story, and we just keep looking at each other like, wow, it gives me still getting goosebumps in the parallel of my brother-in-law. So I also have to tell you that my niece on the right, you know what her mortar hat said? "My mom has the best seat in the house." With the cancer sign, the pink ribbon. So can I tell you that it was a very spirit-filled? Well, let me take you a little further. We get out after the whole graduation. Of course, you know how that goes, announcing everybody's names. There's hundreds of people on the lawn on this campus. And, of course, we're snapping 25 million pictures, with the grandparents and with this and with that. And, we're there probably at least a good 40 minutes. And the step side of the family says they've got twins that are less than 6 months old. We need to go get the stroller. We'll meet you at the car. Okay, fine. They left. And my two nieces walk up to my brother-in-law, and they say, oh, we never got a picture of the three of us. So, they have a picture of them being 7 and 9 like this. He stands in the middle, and he gets down because he's a big guy, and they each go to give him a kiss on the cheek on each side. And a butterfly lands on the iPhone of the person taking the picture. Here's what you need to know. When my sister died, we let boxes of butterflies go. We immediately started bawling. Think my sister was present? Oh, yes. And if that wasn't enough, we got in the van, and you know how that is, leaving all these hundreds of people in a car in the parking garage. And one of the songs from my sister's funeral, In My Daughter's Eyes, plays on the radio. Now, I'm going to say to you, if we weren't all spiritual people, do you think we would have seen that, felt that, or had a space for that to happen? Because if you don't believe, you just don't see it. If you're not mindful, you just don't see it. So my brother-in-law starts out his Facebook page with, "This was one of the best days of my life." Wow. So, next slide, please. Is nature creative? Again, we couldn't have evolved if we were just an assembly line of things. It would be more like, robots that made it through the 1 billion years for all of us to be on this little speck of dust spinning around the universe, right? Evolution is a creative process. The mountains and the rivers are continuing to still be etched and influenced based on, over time. And I love what Matthew Fox said in the book Creativity. Creativity is a cosmic habit. Consider the seasons. Constantly, whether it's weeds or fruit and vegetables, is the earth constantly creating? So what is our nature? What is our nature? Creative. Next slide. So if somebody asks you the question, are you creative, what do you usually say? Yes. I had a woman who was an accountant who says, oh, I'm not creative. And I said, aren't you problem solving every day? She said, yes. And I said, that's creative. But I'm going to take it a little bit deeper. We read The Untethered Soul and talked about how we can see the chatter mind, right? The consciousness. We can see our chatter. We can know what our mind is chattering. I want to ask you, is your chatter mind creative? Oh, yeah. You bet. Ask it to justify why or who or what. Isn't it constantly being creative? You don't even know how creative you are. You tell yourself stories that are very creative. Again, Katie Byron's work is a lot about things happen. Things just are. But we sew the story around all those things. And the 4 agreements, how seriously and personally do we take everything? We create lots of stories about that. So our creativity is innate, and all you have to do is watch kids play to know that. Next slide. So, in order to be creative, tell me what kinds of characteristics or values must also be present to be creative. Presence. Openness. Receptivity. Perception. Okay, appreciation. Willingness, intent. Freedom, freedom for choice, spontaneity, passion, patience, very good, not trying to make it happen, right? So the question is, how often do you allow those characteristics to be with you, to be as you? You know, again, Matthew Fox says, imagination is so vast and so large and so free that it grows our souls and allows us to contemplate grandeur. And I'd like to say more than contemplate. Again, if you're mindful, like Bidwell Park, you can live in that grandeur. And that is divine. So, next slide, please. Matthew Fox, Ernest Holmes. It was funny, I got this book, Creative Mind. I was like, oh, I don't think I have that book, and it's by Ernest Holmes. Okay, I'll take it home. And I started reading it, and I'm like, I swear I've read this before. No, I'm not talking about the Science of Mind textbook. I'm talking about the 1919 version that I got at an estate sale. And I was like, oh, I know where that book is on my 1919. I'm going to say that the board has been talking about our welcome packet, which we're recreating, and our membership packet, which will be a little different. And this is $9.95, by the way. And I think this is something we should give away for those who commit to be members. Because it really is the Science of Mind textbook without getting heady and deep. But it's really about the principles of how we believe that our thoughts are planted in the soil of soul, the medium. And as we plant our thoughts in the soul, and the soil is the consciousness. So we plant our thoughts in the consciousness, and then it demonstrates as a plant, as in the things that actually happen in our life. Well, does anybody know about Matthew Fox? Yeah. He was kicked out of the Catholic Church by the Vatican. Do you know why? His theology is called creation spirituality. And he believes that we were born in original blessing rather than original sin. Does that match? I think he's reading Ernest Holmes. But he very valuably takes the Christian philosophy and speaks to how he feels that all faiths need to open up. And he talks about other faiths also, and including Greek philosophy, about in the Garden of Eden, he doesn't think that Adam took the apple to be hubris, but instead to be creative. I mean, is your life exactly the same every day? Why not? Because creativity is innate. Because we like free will and choice and liberty. So he also speaks to, Matthew Fox also speaks to, did you know that Jesus had a lot of rebellious ideas? Yeah? I mean, isn't that why he was crucified? And so where are your rebellious ideas? Again, you've been given the gift to create, and often the problems that we have are because we've gotten ourselves into a corner and we haven't been creative enough to get out of the corner. Now, I just realized a couple things. First of all, this Sunday I will have been with you as your spiritual co-director for 2 years. Boy, did that go fast. Thank you. And I also remembered that I've been a minister for 18 years. I was like, wow, yeah, as Dr. Carolyn said, when did I start this? It was a long time ago. Yeah, when did I become a staff minister? Wow, a long time ago. And I would say that while we know the truth, that the Spirit of God, universal source, whatever you want to call that, is in us, as us, and lives through us. No doubt about it. But we tend to want to bring that down to the self with the small s. And then when people ask me for treatment, they want to manipulate the weeds. Am I making sense here? So really, we believe in something called first cause, which means when there's something in your life that's like, it feels stuck and you're in a corner, is you go back to first cause. Meaning you don't try to go back and unravel, your, last month we talked about the soul of money. So let's say it's financial issues. You don't go back and try to manipulate everything. For instance, my employer needs to pay me more. Who's your source? God. Same thing in relationship. I'm going to unravel everything that's happening in relationship, but who's your source? And we line up with the truth, which is love. And what would love do here? And what I know as metaphysicians, what we want to start to do is saying, yeah, I know I'm God, so help me figure out how to get through these weeds. But science of mind is really about, no, you got to go back to the mountaintop. What kind of view do you get at the mountaintop? Expansive possibilities, right? And so in some sense, I'm going to say to you that creativity also requires surrender. Does that make sense? Surrender to that higher power for good in the universe that we can choose to use, but that source is not going to help you through the weeds. Instead, treatment, spiritual mind treatment, our form of affirmative prayer, goes back to understanding that the law, the truth comes first. And when I align myself with that, the weeds just sort of fall away because now I have a whole different perspective and I can approach that financial issue or that relationship issue from a whole different perspective. Next slide. So Creative Mind 1919 and Matthew Fox 2004, the principles are still being stated and we're all still learning, aren't we? You can learn till the day you die. Next slide. So, raise your hand if you want a better life. I hope most of you are raising your hand. Next slide. Now keep your hand raised if you want a better life, but you must know that you have to give up the one you have. A little more pausing, yes. It's sort of like, well, I don't know. I have it pretty good. Change? Is it true? I can tell you it's true. Again, in counseling sessions, as we have conversations, it's, but I'm comfortable with this and this and this, and so I really want prayer treatment on maneuvering here. I don't want to give up what I have. I want to change what's around me. But in each moment, and I mean each moment like right here and now, change your thinking, change your life. Next slide. The repetition of your current life just makes things old. And this is in science also, Jason, right? As far as in our mind, we know that the brain is constantly creating new neuronal pathways. But those pathways actually die if we stop using our mind. Crossword puzzles, reading new books, maybe you don't like to read, whatever the case may be, continuing to expand our mind. Why would that be? It's the law. I mean, the universe is still expanding, not contracting. Next slide. So, awakening, our theme for 2018 is awakening, and be ye transformed by the renewal of your mind. Not next week. Yeah, next month. Yeah, because when it comes to actually change right here and now, it's like, am I ready for that? Surrender. Surrender. Next slide. I am a center for spiritual living.
I am a center for spiritual living.
So, spirit and nature are constantly creating. You said what you thought the characteristics of creating are, being open, we went through all those characteristics. Are you living those? Next slide. So we are the creative center, the centers of creative thought, words, and deeds. And all those have to be lined up, right? Which we think we're lined up a lot, but when we end up in that corner, we realize that, well, I thought I was lined up, but Spirit has something else in mind. Are you going to roll with that? Are you? Next slide. How do we reach that creative power? Sorry, next slide. So I want to ask, do you know how to move yourself into creative space? Because what happens is we tend to do routine and habit. And then, again, I'm going to keep repeating, we want to manipulate all the things that are in front of us, which is really just, I want to keep my routine, my habit, and the life that I have, but again, I want the circumstances to change. So when you're in a space where I want something better, I want something more, which is, again, in perfect alignment with nature and how we evolve, how do you go back and reach your creative nature? Because even though we do spiritual mind treatment, which we have 5 steps of treatment, which helps us guide how we start again, knowing that God is, that I am one with that power and that spirit, and hence I recognize what's happening here and now is full potential, full possibilities. I can create anything I want to live that dream. And then I give thanks for that, releasing it into the universe, knowing that my word has power. Because in the beginning was the Word. Next slide. And so we tend to want to react to the conditions we see because we're so used to, doing stuff with what we see. Forgetting that our highest creative power is going back to what we know in truth. Starting at the mountaintop every day. And that's what I call go back to first cause. When I say go back to first cause, I'm saying go back to the mountaintop. Go back to the truth. Next slide. So, in the conditions, it's about letting go of the way you think things should be. Because when you start talking about the way things should be, you have so much judgment already stacked up for this sometimes house of cards. And, the Buddhists would say, return to the beginner's mind. I love walking through the park like I'm an alien from outer space and I've never seen it before. And that's actually from the Emerson class that we teach, is putting yourself in nature and looking around as though you've never seen nature before. Beginner's mind. Next slide. So, creativity is our superpower, but I liked this YouTube. So, if you would, David. So what is mindfulness? Mindfulness is a noun.
Ability to know what's happening in your head at any given moment without getting carried away by it. Imagine how useful this could be. Just as an example, you're driving down the road and somebody cuts you off in traffic. How do you normally react? I think most of us, we normally react by having a thought, which is, I'm pissed. And then what happens next? you immediately, habitually, reflexively inhabit that thought. You actually become pissed. There's no buffer between the stimulus and your reaction. With just a little bit of mindfulness, in that same situation, you might notice my chest is buzzing, my ears are turning red, I'm having a starburst of self-righteous thoughts, I'm getting angry. But you don't necessarily have to act on it and chase that person down the road, screaming at them with your kids in the back of the car thinking you've gone nuts. Now, you might be thinking, don't I need to get angry sometimes? Aren't I justified? I would say yes, but probably not as much as you think. The proposition here is not that you should be rendered by mindfulness into some lifeless, non-judgmental blob. The proposition is that you should learn how to respond wisely to things that happen to you, rather than just reacting blindly. And that, my friends, is a superpower. How do you get it? The way to get it is through meditation. I believe that meditation and mindfulness are the next big public health revolution. In the 1940s, if you told somebody you were going running, they would have said, who's chasing you? But then what happened next? The scientists swooped in, they showed that physical exercise is really good for you, and now all of us do it, and if we don't, we feel guilty about it. And that's where I think we're headed with mindfulness and meditation. It's going to join the pantheon of no-brainers like brushing your teeth, eating well, and taking the meds your doctor prescribed for you. Let me just close by saying, mindfulness is not going to solve all of your problems. It's not going to render your life a nonstop parade of unicorns and rainbows. Nonetheless, this is a superpower, and one that is accessible by you immediately.
And I want to thank David and Ted because I threw that on them this morning, so thank you for being flexible. I appreciate that because it's definitely worth it. So, you know, I can say meditation, I could say mindfulness, it doesn't matter, it's a spiritual practice. And it's the spiritual practice where you allow yourself not to get lost in your thoughts and not to get lost in what you see in your life, but to be able to stand back and know that you have, that there is a good in the universe greater than you are, and you can use it. Reminding yourself to come back to that first cause, reminding yourself to bring yourself back to the mountaintop, and that things can happen to you. But how you attach to them, how you get creative about telling your story about that versus becoming aware. There are so many signs that you can receive, similar to what we received when last week in Arizona with my niece. I can't, you know, people could say, oh, those are such synchronicity and serendipitous things. No. You have to be open to it first. Miracles don't happen for people who don't believe in miracles, right? So you have to bring yourself back to, sorry, David, I'm surprising you all. Remember, there is a higher power for good in the universe, and you must become conscious of your creativity or non-creativity, meaning if you're in your habit of thought. And it's up to us. We have the freedom, the will, the liberty to choose new thoughts, new words, and how you describe what's happening in your life, and new deeds, how it is maybe you serve in the world. So the last slide I had was a blank slate. It's okay. That's okay. That's all right, David. I think I'm 2 more in. Okay. Thank you. There you go. There you go. Next slide. Yep. Okay. It's a blank slate. Why is it a blank slate? I did that by accident, but it wasn't an accident. When I created this, I was like, I printed it out this morning, I was like, oh, I have a blank slide. Maybe I should delete. No. No. This is about where you now step off to become creative. So, what I'm doing is challenging you for this day, for this week, for this month, for the openness, the surrender, the spontaneity, the knowing to go back to first cause, reminding yourself that manipulating the weeds is only going to get you more weeds. To do your spiritual practice so that you can learn to become conscious of what your thoughts are and that chatter mind. And as when I did a presentation at Chico State, one woman said, "You taught me that I don't need to believe my thoughts." But that means becoming conscious. So, I bless you in your journey. Namaste. And now, Holly. Thank you.